If you were watching Earth from above in the year 1860, nothing, absolutely nothing, would convince you that the United States would one day dominate the global system. You would see the British Empire, the most powerful entity on the planet, stretching across continents. You would see France, cultured, industrial, militarily formidable. You would see Russia, a giant with endless land and population. And then you would turn your attention to America. What would you see? A young republic tearing itself apart in civil war, burning cities, a split government, a weak currency, a tiny army, an economy based on farming, not factories. A nation that looked closer to collapse than supremacy. No rational observer would bet on that country. Yet just 85 years later, the landscape of power is unrecognizable. It is 1945. Europe lies in ruins. Germany is crushed. Japan is flattened. France is exhausted. The British Empire is bankrupt. And on the other side of the Atlantic, the United States emerges untouched, industrialized, and overwhelmingly dominant. It now produces half of the world's economic output. It sits on the majority of the world's gold. Its navy controls every ocean. Its factories supply the reconstruction of the very continents that once considered America irrelevant. How does a broken republic turn into the center of the modern world in under a century? To understand that rise, you don't begin with politics. You begin with something older, colder, more fundamental: geography. America's ascent starts with the simple fact that the continent it occupies behaves like a cheat code. Two oceans form natural barriers that protect it from invasion. Few major powers in history have enjoyed that level of insulation. While Europe spent centuries fortifying borders, the US spent decades building railroads, farms, cities, and industries in complete safety. But the real advantage lies inside, not at the coasts. At the heart of North America is a river system so vast, so interconnected, and so efficient that it acts like a built-in economic engine. Barges could move grain, coal, and timber across thousands of kilometers at a fraction of the cost of moving anything over land. In an age before highways and refrigerated trucks, that difference wasn't small. It decided who got rich and who stayed poor. A farmer in Iowa could float corn to the Gulf of Mexico for pennies. A farmer in Eastern Europe or South America could barely get crops out of the countryside without losing most of the profit to transport. Over decades, that cost advantage snowballed into capital. Capital became factories. Factories became cities. Cities became industrial power. America also happened to sit on one of the richest collections of natural resources on Earth: fertile soil, coal, iron ore, oil, natural gas, deep water ports on both coasts. Most nations had to fight overseas, colonize, or conquer to secure these essentials. The United States had them all within a single border. But this wasn't a peaceful gift of nature. It was built on the displacement and destruction of native peoples, on territorial conquest, and on wars that expanded the map. By the dawn of the 20th century, the United States possessed everything a superpower would ever need: secure borders, abundant food, endless fuel, and a transportation network that made its economy run cheaper and faster than almost anywhere else. But having potential is not the same as becoming dominant. To turn those advantages into global supremacy, something else was required: an external shock so large it reshuffled the world. Europe provided exactly that in 1914. When the First World War broke out, the United States was not yet a major power. It owed more money to Europe than Europe owed to it. Wall Street still followed London's lead. But as Britain and France bled themselves dry on the battlefield, their demand for weapons, steel, chemicals, food, and fuel exploded. Their factories were bombed, their workers conscripted, their treasuries drained, so they turned to the only major industrial nation untouched by war: the United States. American exports surged. Gold flowed across the Atlantic. When gold ran out, they borrowed. New York bankers financed the Allied war effort. By the time the war ended, Europe was in debt to America, not the other way around. New York replaced London as the financial heart of the world. America barely fought until the final year of the conflict, but economically, it won. Europe emerged wounded, exhausted, and deeply indebted. America emerged richer, more industrialized, and primed for ascent. That windfall was only the beginning. A second global catastrophe, far deadlier, far larger, would push the United States from rising power to uncontested superpower. When the 1930s arrived, the United States was still not the military titan it would later become. Its army was small, smaller even than Portugal's. Its public was weary from the Great Depression. Its political class had little appetite for global entanglements. But the world was moving toward a second great rupture, and this time the scale would be beyond anything humanity had ever witnessed. As Europe descended into war again in 1939, the United States found itself in a familiar position, distant, insulated, and watching. This distance wasn't just physical, it was strategic. While Germany, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union mobilized entire societies for total war, American factories were still producing consumer goods. But the gears of industry had already been primed from World War I. The machine was idle, but it was enormous. Then came December 1941. The attack on Pearl Harbor didn't just pull America into the war, it unleashed an industrial transformation so vast, so fast, that no nation before or since has matched it. Car plants became aircraft lines. Shipyards worked without pause. Steel, aluminum, fuel, chemicals, everything was redirected into the war effort. Factories that once built sedans now built bombers the size of small houses. Factories that once made typewriters now made machine guns. Factories that once made refrigerators now produced aircraft engines. The numbers are almost too large to feel real. Tens of thousands of aircraft per year, tens of thousands of tanks, millions of rifles, millions of tons of ammunition. A single plant in Michigan could produce a bomber every hour, day and night. But the true advantage of the United States wasn't just output, it was location. While German, Japanese, and Soviet industry was hammered by bombing, invasion, and starvation, American industry grew behind the shield of two oceans. Its homeland was untouched, its supply lines were uninterrupted, its workers were safe. Its factories ran at full speed while its rivals' factories burned. The United States supplied not only its own military, but the armies of its allies. Britain, China, and especially the Soviet Union received food, trucks, locomotives, aircraft, engines, radios, ammunition, mountains of material without which the war could not have been won. This wasn't generosity, it was leverage. By the time the war approached its end, every major Allied power was deeply dependent on American production. And when the dust settled in 1945, only one major industrial power remained unbroken. Europe was flattened, Japan was devastated, the Soviet Union had lost millions and was rebuilding from ashes. Britain was bankrupt, France was exhausted. But America stood tall, its factories stronger than ever, its finances solid, its workforce skilled, its scientists advancing into the atomic age. The United States now controlled most of the world's gold reserves and produced the majority of the world's manufactured goods. Yet dominance in the physical world was not enough. To shape the next century, the United States needed to control something deeper, the rules of the global financial system itself. Even before World War II officially ended, representatives from dozens of countries met in a quiet New Hampshire hotel to decide how money would function after the war. The world needed stability, and the United States, holding almost all of the world's gold, was in a position to dictate terms. The agreement reached there changed the future. Currencies across the world would be tied to the dollar would be tied to gold. If a nation wanted to trade, rebuild, or stabilize its economy, it needed access to US dollars. And because the United States controlled both the money supply and the gold behind it, the system effectively placed Washington at the center of global finance. It was a quiet revolution disguised as international cooperation. The US didn't conquer Europe with armies. It conquered it with liquidity. It didn't seize territory. It seized trust. It didn't rule colonies. It ruled balance sheets. But even trust has limits, and Europe in the late 1940s was in crisis. Its cities were bombed out, its railroads shattered, its populations hungry. Economic collapse wasn't just possible, it was imminent. And fragility breeds ideology. Communist parties were gaining support across France and Italy. The Soviet Union was extending influence into Eastern Europe. The United States realized that if Western Europe collapsed, the dollar system would collapse with it. So Washington launched what would later be celebrated as the Marshall Plan, a massive program of economic assistance to rebuild Western Europe. But behind every dollar of aid was a condition. The money had to be spent on American goods, American machinery, American food, American technical expertise. It wasn't a rescue, it was a reinvestment into the American economy, disguised as generosity. Europe received dollars. Those dollars flowed back to American factories. European governments aligned themselves with U.S. trade policy. Communist influence was contained. The Cold War map solidified. The United States now controlled not only the terms of global finance, but also the industrial recovery of the free world. But to maintain that dominance, it needed something else, a permanent justification for military spending. The Soviet Union provided it. America entered a new phase. an era where war wasn't something that happened occasionally, but that a structural part of the economy. Defense contractors expanded, research labs flourished, universities received military grants, politicians funded weapons programs not just for security, but for jobs in their districts. This ecosystem, the military-industrial complex, became self-sustaining, and though it was built for war, it inadvertently built the foundations of the modern world. GPS began as a military navigation tool. The internet began as a communications network designed to survive nuclear attack. Microchips were developed for missile guidance. Jet engines were perfected for fighters long before commercial jets. The technologies that shape modern life were born from fear, funded by defense budgets, and perfected in laboratories tied to national security. By the 1970s, however, this golden age faced a crisis. The world was catching up. European and Japanese industries were recovering. U.S. spending on wars in Asia strained its finances. Foreign governments began doubting that America had enough gold to back all the dollars circulating around the world. Their doubts were correct. The United States was running out of time, out of gold, and out of excuses. A new move, a bold one, would be needed to preserve global dominance. By the early 1970s, the math stopped working. For decades, the world had been flooded with U.S. dollars held by central banks, by foreign governments, by global corporations. Yet the amount of gold sitting in American vaults hadn't kept pace. Foreign leaders began asking the same uncomfortable question: what happens if everyone tries to redeem their dollars at once? The answer was simple. The United States didn't have enough gold to honor the promise. So one by one, nations began sending dollars back to Washington, demanding physical metal in return. Shipments of gold quietly crossed the Atlantic. Confidence in the dollar wavered. The system the U.S. had built after World War II was on the verge of collapse. And then, in August 1971, the United States made a decision that shocked the world. It suspended the convertibility of dollars into gold. The promise was broken. The anchor of the global financial system vanished overnight. The dollar became a fiat currency, backed not by metal, but by power, credibility, and the belief that the United States would remain the center of global commerce. But belief is fragile. If the world ever doubted the dollar, its value would fall, inflation would rise, and America's dominance would erode. The U.S. needed a new anchor, something the world could not live without, something no nation could ignore. It found that anchor in the Persian Gulf. In 1974, American officials quietly negotiated a deal with the world's most influential oil producer. The terms were unprecedented. All oil sold on global markets would be priced exclusively in U.S. dollars. In return, the United States would provide security, weapons, and political protection. Other exporters followed, and just like that, the dollar was no longer backed by gold. It was backed by energy, the lifeblood of the modern world. Any nation that needed oil, and every nation did, first needed dollars. Factories needed dollars. Airlines needed dollars. Entire governments needed dollars. The U.S. could now create the very currency that the world needed to function. It was a quiet masterstroke, one that allowed America to run deficits that would have destroyed any other country. It fueled decades of American consumption, investment, and global influence. And it ensured that every major economic crisis, from Asia to Latin America, would still require a response from Washington. But while the oil system secured America's financial dominance, another force was shaping its cultural and technological reach. As the Cold War escalated, the United States discovered that influence didn't always require armies. Sometimes it required something far more subtle: desire. Images of beaches, jeans, music videos, neon cities, fast food, Hollywood stories. They all traveled faster than ideology. In nations where governments denounced the U.S., young people still lined up for American jeans, American movies, American brands. The collapse of the Soviet Union wasn't just a geopolitical event, it was a cultural one. By the 1990s, the battlefield expanded again, this time into the digital world. The internet, originally a military project, was handed to the private sector. American companies built the search engines, the operating systems, the cloud servers, the social networks. The world logged in, unknowingly stepping into a digital architecture controlled by Silicon Valley. A startup in Germany, a film studio in Brazil, a university in India all relied on American digital infrastructure. Messages, payments, data storage, advertising, cloud computation. So much of modern civilization passed through servers owned by U.S. corporations. It wasn't a new empire of borders. It was an empire of protocols. By the early 2000s, the United States had three layers of dominance. A financial layer, the dollar. a military layer, the global security system, a digital layer, the platforms that shaped modern life. From the outside, it seemed indestructible. But every system, no matter how large, carries weaknesses within its own design. And over time, those weaknesses began to surface. The first was debt. For decades, the United States had been able to borrow cheaply because the world demanded its currency. But as spending grew and interest obligations mounted, a new reality emerged. America was now paying more in interest on its debt than on its entire defense budget. Power built on borrowing can endure, but not forever. The second weakness came from the weaponization of the dollar. Financial sanctions, once rare, became common tools of American foreign policy. When the U.S. froze the assets of rival nations, it sent a message to every country watching. Your reserves are safe only as long as Washington approves of your behavior. That message encouraged many nations to seek alternatives, accelerating efforts to bypass the dollar entirely. The third weakness was internal. A superpower can withstand rivals abroad, but it cannot easily withstand division at home. Political polarization, institutional distrust, and social fragmentation reached levels unseen since the 1860s. A country divided cannot project stability outward. America's dominance today remains enormous, but no longer unquestioned. The dollar is still the backbone of global trade, but competitors are experimenting with new systems. The U.S. military is still unmatched, but alliances are shifting. American technology still shapes the digital world, but rival ecosystems are emerging. If the 20th century belonged to the United States, the 21st century is no longer guaranteed. History moves in cycles. Great powers rise through a combination of geography, opportunity, and strategy. They decline when those same advantages begin to reverse. The United States rose because it had oceans for shields, rivers for wealth, wars that eliminated competitors, a currency the world adopted, and technologies the world depended on. But the forces that built an empire can erode it just as fast. Debt strains credibility, rivals adapt, allies drift, internal divides widen, and the global system the U.S. once designed now evolves without waiting for its permission. The truth is not that America is collapsing. The truth is that the world is rebalancing, and for the first time in a century, the United States must compete rather than simply dominate. The real question is no longer how America became a superpower. The real question is what happens to a global order when its central pillar begins to bend. Most people won't see the shift until it becomes impossible to ignore. But the signs are already visible across currencies, across technology, across politics, across markets. And when the next shock comes, it won't be an isolated event. It will be the continuation of a long arc that began more than 100 years ago when a fractured young nation used geography, war, finance, and ambition to rewrite the world. Nothing built by power lasts forever, but while it lasts, it shapes everything. The only real mystery now is simple. For how much longer will the world orbit the American center, and what new center is quietly forming in its place?